Welcome to the many interpretations of Megaraptora. That's right, we will be taking a look of the clade known as Megaraptora. That includes a few different animals. The animals that we will be taking a look at today are Megaraptor, Fukuiraptor, Arestion, Australovenator, and Mite. Probably some of the most famous Megaraptors. These ones were basically the most requested in the Discord, so those are the ones that we will be taking a look at today. Megaraptora is a pretty interesting group. It's a group that we don't know too much about, especially in terms of its classification. We know that they're theropods, but where exactly on the theropod family tree they sit is really kind of up in the air and is always the matter of some debate and some new research and stuff like that. Recently, there was a new Megaraptor species found known as Joaquin Raptor that might potentially shed some new light on this family of dinosaurs, and hopefully in the future it does, because I would love to learn more about it. Their history in media is also pretty interesting, mostly because of those classification issues, so this will be really fun to dive into. But without further ado, let's just dive right into it. First, we will look at the namesake of this group, that being Megaraptor itself. Megaraptor did live in the late Cretaceous of what is now Argentina. And when it was first discovered, its giant hand claw was thought to be like a sickle claw, the ones that are found on the feet of dromaeosaurs and troodontids. It wasn't classified as either a dromaeosaur or a troodontid. It was just thought that it had a similar adaptation. But later media depictions made it look like a dromaeosaur, or one of the raptor dinosaurs. And that is very apparent in our first depiction, which comes from Warpath Jurassic Park. This it's very similar to the Jurassic Park Velociraptor in its design, mostly with like the head shape, with the way that the arms look and the way that the feet look, and of course with the presence of the sickle claw. If you showed this to me and you told me it was like a Jurassic Park dromaeosaur, like maybe a Utah raptor, or maybe just a stylized version of the Velociraptor, I'd probably believe you. But this was kind of like the common thought for many earlier depictions. It wasn't until we found a later fossil specimen of Megaraptor that we found out that this huge claw actually belongs to its hand, and they actually had these huge hands with these massive claws. That's something that we will see in some later depictions, like a little bit of Dinosaur Train. Dinosaur Train is stylized, so it's not like completely accurate, but its hands are there. It does have the huge claws on its hands, and it does not have a sickle claw on its feet, or two sickle claws. It doesn't have one sickle claw on each foot, so that is a correct depiction right there. It's also portrayed eating fish. I think in the episode, it's like in a little bit of a fish catching competition with Spinosaurus, which is just an interesting portrayal overall. The skull shape is also very interesting. We don't have the skull of an adult Megaraptor. Rather, we have like skull material of a juvenile Megaraptor. And the juvenile, it has like a very thin snout, but that's likely something that will change once the animal grows. Although in other Megaraptors, we do see thin snouts overall, but it's likely that it would be a little bit more robust compared to the juvenile snout. This is not a bad take on it, though. I think it looks pretty good overall. Next up, it comes from Dinosaur King. So this one kind of seems like a combination of like the old dromaeosaur-like design and the more modern renditions. It does have a thinner snout for one, not nearly as blocky as say the Jurassic Park Warpath or Warpath Jurassic Park version had. It has the huge arms with huge claws, but it also still does have a sickle claw, which is outdated. Megaraptor didn't have that. The colors on this are sick, and I love the sparse feathers. That's just a nice little added touch. Megaraptors might have had feathers. We just don't really have evidence for it, but it is still something that is a possibility. There's also Dinosaur Battle World Championship. This Megaraptor also has like the sparse feathers. It has a skull shape that is a little bit more reminiscent to more modern depictions. The more modern depictions that you'll see will have a thinner snout. It'll be like almost, in some depictions, it'll be like almost like an arrowhead, like with the tip of the snout being very thin, leading into like a triangle all the way to the base of the skull. Very interesting overall. This depiction does have the huge arms with the huge claws, though they are a little bit scaled back. Megaraptors just had really big claws. It's crazy. It's not bad. It's another stylized design. I figured I would also include this one because I've talked about it before in short form content, but that is the Night Feeder from Primal. So I think that this is most similar to a Megaraptor, so I figured I'd include it in the Megaraptor portion of this video because I think that it fits that description. We don't really have confirmation on what exactly it is. There's a lot of theories out there. One of them being the possibility that it's a little Compsognathus that ate some of that black goo and of course became the Night Feeder, because obviously, you know, that black goo just like it turns like regular apes into basically like King Kong. So it makes sense that it would make a little Compsognathus into something like the Night Feeder. But personally, I like to look at it as like a Megaraptor because it has some of those traits that we've been talking about, like the thinner snout, kind of like an elongated body. We haven't talked about that too much, but the body kind of looks like a Megaraptor body in a way, still stylized. And of course, the huge claws. It's actually likely that this group of dinosaurs would prioritize using their claws over their bite because it seems like they had a relatively weak bite force, but they had these huge claws and a wide range of motion in their claws, or their hands in general. And so it's likely that they would use their hands to grab onto prey more so than using their bite. It's just really fascinating stuff. So yeah, I'm counting the Night Feeder. I think that that's kind of like a good... I think like calling it a Megaraptor is a fair assumption. And then we have Ark Survival Ascended. Now this one is cool. This is, of course, a design that will be coming out here pretty soon. I don't know if it's out yet, at least by the time of recording. It could be, but I know that it was like over the horizon. But the concept art looks so dang good. Like, I mean, just look at those feathers, look at the coloration that it has. I mean, it'll probably have different colors in the game, but the coloration, the whole build of it looks fantastic. It has an awesomely shaped snout, huge arms. It is oversized, which is pretty typical for Ark design, so I'm not really surprised about that. But everything else just looks really good. Like, this is just a fantastic design, and it's probably one of my favorite Megaraptor designs out there. Like, just awesome job, guys. This one's kind of like an honorable mention, but I figured I'd put it in here too. Again, because of another one of my short form contents, that is the Indoraptor. So the Indoraptor is not meant to be any dinosaur. It is a completely fictional dinosaur, and honestly, the same probably applies to the Night Feeder as well. One of those theories, but I did make a video stating, like, trying to figure out which animal it looks the most like, and I think it looks the most like a Megaraptor. It's not a perfect analog. There's a lot of differences, like the fact that it has opposable thumbs, it has the sickle claws on its feet, it is able to switch to quadrupedal locomotion, which means it walks around on all fours. The snout is way too rounded. It's definitely not close, but I think it's the closest out of any other theropod dinosaur. So we're putting it in the Megaraptor portion. Yeah, you know, it's a fun fictional dinosaur design. Next up, we will move on to our next Megaraptor, that being Fukuiraptor. This fella lived in the early Cretaceous of what is now Japan. They are one of the most basal Megaraptors, and so a lot of their traits were probably a little bit different from the more later derived Megaraptors that we see in the fossil record. Not too much is known about it, and when it was first discovered, it was thought to be a dromaeosaur, kind of a similar story as the one that we heard with Megaraptor itself, but this one was full on considered to be a dromaeosaur for a time. Obviously, we now know that it's a Megaraptor, but it's like one of the earliest Megaraptors. Don't have a skull either, so we don't really know what the shape of it truly was. But it makes an appearance in Fossil Fighters, where it has like kind of like an armadillo style back or an ankylosaur style back. It's very interesting. It also has kind of like Carnotaurus style horns. Very unique design, all things considered, very different from any Megaraptor design that I've seen. It also makes an appearance in Dinosaur King. This design is really not too bad all around. Like, when you're looking at it, you could probably guess that this is meant to be a Megaraptor. So that is something that I very much do appreciate, and I think it looks cool. It has kind of like tiger stripes going on, so I think it's a fun design. It has more of like a broad skull. It has decently long arms and an elongated body, but it's definitely not terrible. There's also the Jurassic World Alive Fukuiraptor, and yeah, this one it's a Jurassic Park Velociraptor, basically, like just with a different striping. I think that's pretty much the same model. Maybe the claws are a little bit larger, but all around, this is not really a good Megaraptor design in general. It just fits the Jurassic Park Velociraptor style way more than it does a Megaraptor style. This one was released after we knew that it was a Megaraptor, so can't really use the dromaeosaur excuse. I also know that Japan is working on a documentary that I think will be focused on Fukui Raptor entirely. I think it's only releasing in Japan, which is unfortunate because look at this cover, look at this art, look how cool that looks. I think it's a very good design. We don't really have any skull material, so we don't know what the skull would look like. It's, it's definitely possible that more basal Megaraptors would have a wider skull, like wider when you look at it from the side, as opposed to the more thin skull, but I don't really think we really know. I just love this. I think this looks really cool. The yellow and the orange is just, those are sick colors. Our next Megaraptor that we will be looking at is Arestion, which is, we don't have many depictions of this fella, but one of the depictions I think is very fascinating. That comes from Dinosaur Planet. These Carcharodontosaurids right here. So interesting history with that, another classification issue with another Megaraptor. When the Arestion fossils were discovered, it took a minute for them to actually be identified as a different, like a separate theropod entirely. When they were first examining them, it was thought that they were Carcharodontosaurid fossils. I don't think they were officially described yet, but by the time Dinosaur Planet was made, I believe that they heard that there was potentially a type of Carcharodontosaurid in that general area. That's what they showed in the documentary. Obviously, now we know that these fossils belonged to a Megaraptor, which is very different from the Carcharodontosaurid. These are pretty decent Carcharodontosaurid depictions, but not that great of Megaraptor depictions. Someone on DeviantArt by the name of King Rexy actually reconstructed them to look like Arestion with the same coloration, and I think that that looks so cool. I love when people do stuff like that, but that's one of the most interesting histories out there. Just like there was a point in time where these fossils were thought to be Carcharodontosaurid fossils, and you actually have the result of that thought in a documentary. I always think that stuff like that is so fun. Next up is the Path of Titans Arestion mod. I quite like this. This is my first time actually trying it out. Like, I knew it existed, but I haven't had the chance to actually use it yet. And yeah, no, it looks really good. It looks like a very classic Megaraptor design with all of the traits that I've been yapping about for the last however many minutes. Like that snout shape, the way the body looks, and of course the huge arms with huge claws. And like, look at the size of that thumb claw there. That would be terrifying if it tore into you. This is a very nicely made model. I really like the way that the animations, like the way that they move around. And let me hear some of the sounds. What does this one do? Kind of some loud, like growling. We can get a Didelphodon. Hooah! Hiya! Gotcha. Okay. There we go. We got a Didelphodon. Yeah, no, it's a good model. I like it. Next up is Australovenator. Australovenator, it also has a depiction that's a little bit tricky, that being walking with dinosaurs, aka the polar allosaur. So the reason why I think this one's tricky is because we don't really know if this is meant to be Australovenator. Everybody, that's the common thought amongst everybody. Everybody likes to state that this one is. I'll talk about the history real quick about this. This allosaur, it was based off of a singular fossil that belonged to a leg bone. It was obviously a theropod leg bone. This information actually comes from Walking with Dinosaurs, the evidence. How did they know that? This gives a lot of behind the scenes information about different design choices or different creature choices in the show. And here is the justification for having an allosaur in the documentary. It says so right in this section, was the large polar theropod an allosaur? When first described in 1981 by doctors Ralph Molnar, Timothy Flannery, and Thomas Rich, this bone was thought to be very similar to that of Allosaurus, the late Jurassic predator of North America and Portugal. The find was therefore interpreted as proof of the presence of Allosaurus in early Cretaceous of Australia. There were some differences from the Austrogales and the known species of Allosaurus, suggesting that this was a different species. So that was pretty much their justification for having Allosaurus in this. Nowadays, that fossil, that specific leg fossil, we don't even know if, we don't know what type of theropod for sure it was. It could potentially be an abelosaurid fossil, or it could potentially be a Megaraptor fossil, in which case it could possibly be Australovenator. Most people take the Australovenator route. I know that Mario Lanzas took the Australovenator route with this amazing art right here, but I don't think that we know for sure if that's what this fossil belongs to. So I think that this one's a little bit tricky, but it is always fun to call this, Allosaur model an Australovenator. because obviously it's just so different. It is literally just the Walking with Dinosaurs Allosaurus, just with different colors, which makes sense because it was a polar allosaur. But yeah, that one's a little bit tricky, but I definitely wanted to include it because it has an interesting history. There's also Dino Stampede and a few other documentaries that use this same model. This model looks pretty dang good. Like, I love the way that it looks. It's very unique. It has awesome colors with the black and the orange and some yellows. Fantastic overall. Its snout has a very interesting shape. We only have the lower jaw of Australorventor, so I guess the upper jaw, that's open for some interpretation. This is the route that they seem to take, and I think it's a fine route. Overall, I really like this depiction. I love the way that the arms look, and I love the way that the claws look, and I just love the way that the face looks. Look how mean it looks. That is a glare right there. So that's a pretty fine depiction. Australorventor also does make an appearance in Jurassic World Evolution 2. Has not been confirmed for Jurassic World Evolution 3, which is a little bit unfortunate. But this one captures pretty much everything that I think you would expect for this dinosaur. Huge arms with huge claws, a snout that is pretty thin, but the upper jaw, they took some creative liberties with it because we don't have the upper jaw. That makes sense. Also, you can give some really cool colors to these fellas. Before we move on for Australorventor, one more fact about it. It does have apparently what seems to be very flexible arms, like more flexible than most other theropods. Which is something that helps support the idea that Megaraptors would prioritize using their arms when hunting. That was just a little fun fact that I wanted to throw in there. And then lastly, but certainly not leastly, we do have Mipe. It lived in the late Cretaceous of Argentina, and it is possibly the largest Megaraptorid that we have in the fossil record, with an estimated length of around 9 to 10 meters or 30 to 33 feet. Which is certainly saying a lot because other Megaraptors are also pretty big, including animals like Megaraptor itself, which is 8 meters or 26 feet in length. So definitely no slouch, and also, weighing a ton or 2,200 pounds. With one of the smallest ones being Fukui Raptor, which, it was a young specimen that we have, but it has a length of around 4.2 meters or 14 feet. But again, it's immature, so it's not a fully grown specimen. But Mipe was certainly a huge theropod in a group of theropods that range in a lot of different sizes, but some of them were pretty big as well. There's not a lot of depictions of Mipe. It was officially described back in 2022, one of the most recent Megaraptors, but not the most recent. That belongs to Joaquin Raptor, but it's still a very, very new and fresh dinosaur. It did show up in Dinosaur Superworld with sick colors. I love the blue, and I love the quality of the CGI as well. It also has a very good Megaraptor design, the very thin and arrowhead-shaped snout, the huge arms with powerful, like huge claws, and sparse feathers too, which is something that I always love to see. Again, we don't quite know if they had something like that, but it's definitely not outside of the realm of possibility. I love this one. This is probably one of my favorite Megaraptor depictions, period. Though it does seem like they pronate their wrists a little bit too much. I did mention that they had like a wider range of motion than most other theropods, but I don't think it was quite that much. I still don't think they were able to, go from this to this, like full-on pronation. I don't think that was really possible. That is something that would certainly break their wrists. Fantastic design. I love the CGI. I think that they're so good. And then last, but certainly not least, we have the Path of Titans mod. Look how flipping cool this thing is. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with it. Obviously, the model is very nice. It has all of those traits that we've talked about. There's a few different variations. You can choose a few different models. One that, has the teeth exposed, some of them that change the skull shape, and this one that actually adds some light feathering towards the back of towards its back and on its arms. It's very nice. The claws look really good, but I think the most iconic thing about this fella would have to be the calls. It's terrifying. There's like a hint of an elk bugle in that. I love the way the elk bugles sound, and so mixing that with a dinosaur like this just sounds really sick. There's also the hyena one. The sound design for Mipe is just really cool overall. Like, I think that they really killed it in that department. And again, with the model too, that paired with the model, I think just makes the whole thing look very nice. So yeah, another very good Mipe design. And there we have it. Those were some of the biggest examples of Megaraptora. This was a pretty fun one to dive into, a little bit of a tough one as well because of some of the classification issues and just the sheer amount that I wasn't really expecting. There were more Megaraptor depictions than I thought, which is cool. I'm glad that there was, but I'm sure that we're going to be seeing more of this dinosaur in the future, especially with its increasingly growing popularity in the public. More and more people are learning about them, which I think is downright radical. So yeah, hopefully we can learn a little bit more about its classification in the future. Currently, I think they might be within Coelurosauria, but I think I've heard whispers that they might be within within Carcharodontosaurus, Sauria, which, you know, again, it's all over the place. We don't quite know, but I think that currently they might be in Coelurosauria. That means they'd be a lot more closely related to dinosaurs like birds or tyrannosaurs or dromaeosaurs and stuff like that. But obviously, that's always in flux. We're still learning more about Megaraptora as time goes on, and I certainly hope that we can learn even more as more time goes on. But I do hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed making this video. If you liked it and you like dinosaur-related content, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you on board, and that's pretty much all I do here. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and have an awesome day.